My name is Sarah Thompson. I'm 53 years old, a woman who once held the world in her hands, or at least, I believed I did. For most of my life, I lived in the shadow of the decisions I made for others. My children, my husband, my friends. Now, it feels as though that shadow is suffocating me, and I don't know how to escape. I'm a mother, a wife, and I always thought I'd be a grandmother someday. But at 53, I find myself standing at the precipice of a life that has become unrecognizable. And today, I stand in front of a lawyer, clutching a piece of paper that could undo everything I've known about love, family, and sacrifice. I walked into the lawyer's office, the air thick with formality. The scent of polished wood and fresh paper filled my lungs as I stepped toward the desk. There, on the smooth surface of the lawyer's desk, lay a thick white envelope. Its weight was enough to send a chill through my spine. The lawyer, Mr. Richards, barely acknowledged my presence as he finished scribbling something in his notebook. I sat down carefully, eyeing the envelope as if it might suddenly reveal some dark secret. But it didn't. It was just a bill, a wedding bill. My daughter, Lily, had sent it. The woman who had once sat on my lap as a little girl, laughing and telling me about the fairy tale weddings she dreamed of. The woman who was now sitting somewhere else, far from me, living her own life and leaving me to pick up the pieces of what felt like an impossible puzzle. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Richards said, his voice breaking through my thoughts. "I'm sure you've seen the contents of this before, but I must explain what this means." I nodded, trying to keep my composure, but inside my heart was pounding in my chest. I tore open the envelope, and the moment I saw the numbers printed on the page, a wave of nausea swept over me. $75,000, the total cost of Lily's wedding, the amount I was being asked to pay. Not a single word had been spoken to me beforehand, no conversation, no warning, just a cold, impersonal bill demanding payment for something I had no say in. "I don't understand," I muttered. "Why would she do this?" Mr. Richards cleared his throat, obviously uncomfortable. "Your daughter, Mrs. Thompson, requested that you cover the cost of the wedding in full. She mentioned something about family obligations and the way things should be handled." I could feel my hands trembling as I gripped the paper. My mind raced, but it was as if the words wouldn't form. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, about everything I thought I understood about being a mother. "She didn't invite me," I whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "She didn't even ask if I wanted to be part of her wedding. And now, she wants me to pay for it." Mr. Richards nodded, a hint of sympathy in his eyes. "It's unfortunate, but the wedding planners require the funds, and the venue has already been booked. If the payment isn't made soon, there will be consequences. Consequences. For me, for Lily, for our family." My chest tightened as I imagined what this could mean. What had happened to the daughter I knew? The one who once held my hand and asked for my advice. Now, she had turned into a stranger, someone who thought I was nothing more than a bank account. As I left Mr. Richards' office, my mind continued to swirl. I had always sacrificed for my children, given them everything I could, never asking for anything in return. But was this really what it was all about? Was this the price of love? To be used, to be manipulated for the sake of a wedding that wasn't even mine. I stared at the bill in my hand, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. The question gnawed at me: can I be a mother without paying the price for loving my children? I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone. The screen was dimmed, but I could still make out the message that haunted me. Call failed. Call failed. Each missed call from me was another step further into a nightmare I didn't know how to escape. I had never been the kind of mother to demand attention or try to control every part of my children's lives, but this was different. This wasn't just a casual oversight. This was deliberate. I had tried to reach Lily countless times, every call going unanswered. The silence on the other end of the line cut deeper each time. It was like she had turned her back on me entirely, without a second thought. I tried to tell myself that maybe she was busy, maybe she had something going on. But the truth weighed heavy on my chest. I had never felt so invisible to her, so discarded. After hours of waiting and wondering, I finally received a text from Lily. I read it once, then twice, as if my eyes could somehow deceive my brain into thinking I had misread it. "Mom, you're not allowed to attend the wedding unless you pay the full amount of the bill. Don't bother calling again." I blinked, the words blurring as tears pricked my eyes. My hands trembled as I lowered the phone. Pay the full amount. My mind couldn't wrap itself around it. She had made it clear. She didn't want me there unless I paid for something that wasn't even my choice. I didn't recognize this woman who was once my little girl. For years, I had been her rock, the one she leaned on when life got tough, the one who held her hand when she was scared and whispered that everything would be okay. How had I gone from being her comfort to a mere financial transaction? The cold weight of betrayal settled in the pit of my stomach as I tried to process the next part of the message. I thought of the times we'd spent together, the years of motherhood where I had given everything to ensure she had the best life. And now, all of that was reduced to a demand. It wasn't just the wedding that tore at my heart. It was the realization that she had gone a step further. She had taken this matter to the courts, asking them to issue a legal order. No access to any family events. I couldn't understand how something so simple had spiraled into something so grotesque. I felt my hands begin to shake. I had heard stories of families being torn apart over money, but never once had I thought it would happen to us. Not to me, not with my daughter. And yet, here I was, facing the consequences of a decision that I didn't make. I sat down, feeling the weight of it all. My daughter had decided that paying the bill was the only way to earn back my place in her life. The concept of unconditional love, of motherhood, suddenly seemed like a distant memory. I had sacrificed so much for her, but was all of it really worth it? Was any of it truly reciprocated? Or had I been living in an illusion of my own making? Was this what being a mother truly meant? Sacrificing everything, even your own dignity, for a love that could be so easily thrown aside. The pain of the betrayal was sharp, but the emptiness that followed was worse. Maybe some sacrifices weren't meant to be made. The bill sat in front of me, its presence undeniable. The numbers, bold and cold, seemed to stare back at me from the page as if mocking my every decision, my every sacrifice. The $75,000, the price of a wedding that was never meant for me. I traced the digits with my finger, each one a reminder of how far my daughter had drifted from the person I thought I knew. From the girl who once clung to me for comfort, the girl who once looked to me for guidance, for love. Now, it seemed like that love had been replaced with a transaction, something cold and impersonal, something I couldn't even recognize. I had always believed that being a mother meant giving everything, that love had no price. But now, staring at that bill, I wondered if the price of love was too much to bear. I had tried to call her, tried to understand, tried to bridge the gap that had formed between us. But each call went unanswered. Each attempt at reaching out felt like a slap to my face. I wasn't sure when it had started, this distance between us, but it had become undeniable now. She didn't need me anymore, or so it seemed. She had moved on, and I had been left behind in the wake of her decisions. I was on the verge of tears when I heard the knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, I found Marissa, Lily's best friend, standing on the other side. She looked like she had something heavy weighing on her, her expression hesitant. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson," she said softly. "Can I come in? We need to talk." I didn't know what to expect. Part of me wanted to send her away, to shut myself off from anything that could make this situation worse. But part of me, the part that still clung to the hope of understanding, nodded and stepped aside. Once inside, Marissa sat down, wringing her hands in her lap. Her eyes flickered nervously, and I could tell that whatever she had to say wasn't easy. "I don't know how to say this," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Lily, she's been selling the wedding gifts." I blinked, confused. "What?" "She's been selling everything," Marissa continued, her gaze falling to the floor. "The jewelry, the designer items, even the gifts your friends gave her. She's using the money to pay off the wedding debt. She didn't want you to know." But I couldn't just sit back and watch. I sat down in a chair, my mind reeling. It felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. How could she do this? How could she sell the gifts, the things that were meant to symbolize the love and support of our family and friends? And why hadn't she told me? Why hadn't she come to me for help? The disappointment crashed over me like a tidal wave, drowning out the anger that I knew should have been there. This wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, about the betrayal of a bond that I had cherished for so many years. My heart ached as I thought about how far Lily had fallen from the daughter I once knew. The silence between us stretched on, the weight of the truth hanging heavily in the air. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to yell, to demand an explanation, to shake some sense into her. But instead, all I could do was sit there, trying to process the reality that my daughter had chosen to betray me in the worst possible way. Can I still love a daughter who doesn't trust me? The question haunted me, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I had given everything for her, and now I wasn't sure if that was enough. Would it ever be enough again? Would the love I had for her ever be returned, or had I given too much without realizing that she had already moved on? The truth was too much to bear, and yet I had no choice but to face it. My daughter had changed, and so had I. The phone in my hand felt heavier than it ever had before. It wasn't just the weight of the device. It was the weight of the decision that lay within it. A decision to reach out, to speak to Lily again. Even though every part of me screamed to let go, to move on, to stop chasing after a daughter who had already pushed me away, I couldn't. Because I was her mother. And no matter how hard it became, I couldn't just stop trying. I dialed her number, my fingers trembling as I pressed the buttons. I'd been here before, countless times, trying to find the words that would bridge the gap between us. But this time, when the call connected and I heard her voice, I knew this conversation would be different. "Mom, what do you want?" she asked, her voice flat, detached, as if she had already braced herself for whatever I was about to say. "Lily," I said, taking a deep breath, "we need to talk. This can't go on. I can't keep watching from the sidelines while you make decisions that affect both of us." She sighed audibly. "Mom, I don't need you to lecture me right now." I pressed my lips together, forcing the words out. "I'm not lecturing you. I'm trying to understand why you've cut me off. Why you're refusing to let me help with the wedding. Why I'm not allowed to be a part of your life anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the silence stretching out between us like an ocean that was impossible to cross. "I didn't ask for your help, Mom," Lily said finally, her tone sharp now. "I didn't want your help. You've already done enough, more than enough, and look where it got us. You keep thinking you have to save me. But I'm fine. I can take care of myself." Her words stung, each one like a slap in the face. I had given her everything. My time, my energy, my love. All these years of sacrifices. And this was how she saw me. I had done everything for her, and yet here she was, telling me that she didn't need me. That my help, my love, was just an inconvenience. "I know you think you're doing this on your own," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay strong. "But Lily, you don't have to do this alone. I'm your mother. I'm here for you. I always have been. But you can't keep shutting me out like this." She laughed bitterly, and it sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Shutting you out? Mom, I'm the one who's been shut out. You've never really been there for me. Not the way I needed. All those years of sacrificing, what did it give me? It gave me a mother who thinks that everything can be fixed with money and control." I blinked back tears, the words hitting me harder than I had expected. Was that what she thought of me? That I had been controlling, that I had tried to buy her love? Had all my sacrifices, all my years of devotion, led to this? "You think I don't see it, don't you?" she continued, her voice rising with frustration. "I've taken care of everything. You didn't have to pay a single dime. I've figured it out. And if you think I need you to bail me out, you're wrong." The finality in her voice was like a door slamming shut. The truth, the painful, heartbreaking truth, was that she didn't need me anymore. She didn't want me anymore. I hung up the phone without saying another word. The tears came then, hot and unrelenting, but they didn't bring relief. The weight of everything, of my love, my sacrifices, my failures, crushed me. As a mother, was I only here to give? Was my role to continually sacrifice, without ever asking for something in return? Should I just keep giving and giving, even when it felt like nothing I did was enough? The question lingered in my mind, unanswered. And as I sat there, feeling utterly empty, I realized that maybe being a mother didn't mean endless sacrifice. Maybe it also meant asking for respect, for understanding, for the simple recognition that my love had value too. The doors of the lawyer's office were heavy, as though they held the weight of every difficult decision I had ever faced in my life. I stepped inside, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor, and found myself in the sterile, intimidating environment of a place where legal battles unfolded, where destinies were altered with a single sentence. I had always prided myself on making my own decisions, on being in control. But today, I felt the distinct hum of powerlessness in the air around me. The receptionist led me into an office where Mr. Richards, the lawyer I had hired, waited with a pile of papers spread out in front of him. He motioned for me to sit. "I've been reviewing your case," he began, his voice crisp, professional. "And I believe you need to understand the full scope of what's at stake here." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. The weight of the situation pressed on me more than I cared to admit. "Tell me everything," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "What are my rights in this situation? What can I do?" He looked down at the papers in front of him, his fingers lightly tapping against the surface. "Your daughter has made it clear that if you do not pay the full cost of the wedding, she doesn't want you involved in her life. At least not in any meaningful way. Legally, she is well within her rights to sever ties with you based on that condition. The financial agreement was made, and now it's a matter of fulfilling it." I could feel my heart sinking. So it wasn't just about a wedding. This was about her cutting me out of her life entirely, and I was being forced into this situation with no way out. "Are you saying I have no choice?" I asked, my voice trembling now. "That if I don't pay, I'll never be part of her life again?" Mr. Richards hesitated for a moment, as if weighing the right words. "Essentially, yes. If you don't pay, your daughter has the legal right to enforce the conditions of her demands, not just for the wedding. If she decides she wants no further contact, that's her prerogative." I felt a coldness creeping over me. Her prerogative. The words stung. She was my daughter. She wasn't supposed to have this kind of control over me. I wasn't supposed to be bargaining for my place in her life like I was begging for scraps of affection. "But that's not all," Mr. Richards added, leaning forward. "If you fail to pay, she has the right to take you to court for breach of contract. She could sue you, and you'd be forced to either pay or face legal consequences. The court could issue a judgment against you, which could result in your wages being garnished or assets being seized." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat back in the chair, trying to process what he was saying. This wasn't just about losing my daughter's love. This was about losing everything. My home, my savings, my dignity, all at the mercy of a legal system that had no concept of family love, no understanding of the sacrifices that had been made. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask him how any of this could possibly make sense. But all I could do was sit there, feeling a cold sweat form on the back of my neck. This wasn't the future I had imagined for myself. Mr. Richards glanced at me, as if reading my thoughts. "You have a decision to make. If you pay, you can continue to have a relationship with your daughter. At least, that's what she's demanding. If you don't, then you face the consequences. There's no middle ground here." I left the office in a daze, feeling the weight of the decision that now lay before me. Every decision has its price, Mr. Richards had said. And now, I would have to face that price. What would it cost me to fight for my daughter's love? Would I be willing to pay it? And if I didn't, what would that mean for the rest of my life? The path ahead seemed uncertain, but one thing was clear: no matter what I decided, there would be no turning back. I had made the decision. This was it, one last attempt to break through the silence. I had tried everything else: letters, messages, sending gifts, waiting for her to come around. But nothing had worked. So I picked up the phone again, my thumb hovering over her name in my contacts. The sound of the dial tone seemed louder than it should have been, echoing through the quiet of my kitchen. I sat at the table, my hands shaking as I held the phone. I didn't want to do this, but I couldn't stand the thought of never hearing her voice again. If I didn't try now, I would regret it forever. It only rang twice before she picked up. "Lily," I said, the sound of her name caught in my throat. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a plea. I was asking for something I wasn't sure she had left to give. Her voice came through, distant and clipped, like she was speaking through a wall. "Mom, what do you want?" she asked. Her tone was flat, no emotion, just a functional question, as if she was talking to a stranger. I just want to talk, sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking. "Can we talk, please?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, so long that I began to wonder if she had hung up. But then she spoke. and the words cut deep, sharper than I expected. "I don't want to talk to you, Mom." She let out a small sigh. "You've made everything worse." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, barely able to form the words, the weight of her cold dismissal pressing down on me. "I mean exactly that." Her voice was getting more strained, more impatient, as if I was the one holding her hostage. "Everything you've done, everything you've said, you've made my life harder. I don't need you anymore. You're not helping. All you've done is make me feel guilty. Like I'm somehow wrong for wanting to live my life without you hovering over me. Lily, I just wanted to be there for you. To help you." I started, but I could hear the click before I finished my sentence. The phone went dead. I stared at the screen, the call ended, the cold finality of it settling in my chest. My hands were trembling, the phone still pressed to my ear as though I could somehow turn it back on, rewind the seconds and try again. But there was no rewind button in life. There was no undo. Just as I began to put the phone down, a text message came through. It was from Lily. "Don't bother calling me again. You've embarrassed me enough. Please don't make this worse." The words stung more than I thought possible. Embarrassed me enough. That was all I was to her now. An embarrassment. A reminder of all the things she no longer wanted, no longer needed. I had failed. Failed as a mother, failed as someone she could turn to. She didn't trust me anymore. She didn't need me anymore. I put the phone down slowly, as if the weight of it might crush me. I wanted to scream, to shout, to do anything that would break the suffocating silence that filled the room. But I couldn't. All I could do was sit there, letting the tears fall silently. How could a mother continue to love her child when that child no longer trusted her? How could I keep loving someone who had already made it clear that I no longer had a place in their life? The love didn't fade, though. It never could. But the question remained, how can you keep loving someone who doesn't believe in you anymore? I sat in front of my computer, my fingers hovering over the keys, hesitating. The weight of the decision hung over me like a storm cloud that I couldn't shake. For months, I had tried to avoid this moment, tried to convince myself that I could hold on to the remnants of dignity I had left. But here I was, standing at the edge, about to make a decision that would change everything. The screen in front of me reflected a number that made my stomach churn, 75,000. The cost of a wedding that I was never invited to. The cost of a relationship that had been eroded by pride, by bitterness, by demands I couldn't meet. And yet, in this moment of weakness, I made the decision that I thought would save me from the ache of abandonment. I would pay. I would give her everything, if only to free her from the burden of worry. If only so she could begin her new life without looking back, without wondering if she had made the right choice. I had been raised to believe that love was sacrifice, that love meant doing whatever it took for the people you cared about. And so, without another thought, I entered the account details. My hands shook as I hit send. The transaction confirmed with a few simple clicks. The money was gone, my savings reduced, the last of my security slipping through my fingers. For a moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. Perhaps this was the price of peace. Perhaps this was the way to finally mend what had been broken. I could see Lily in my mind, smiling as she walked into her new life, free from the weight of debt that had been imposed upon her. The relief I had hoped for never came. Instead, I felt a hollow emptiness, as though I had just made a transaction with something that could never be returned. A few days passed, and I waited. I waited for some acknowledgement, some sign that my sacrifice had been worth it. A thank you. A simple, heartfelt message that would tell me I had done the right thing. But nothing came. Not a word. Not even a cursory acknowledgement. The silence was deafening. I wanted to call her, to ask if she had received the money, to hear her voice again. To know that at least something of the mother-daughter bond remained. But when I thought about it, I knew what would come next: another cold dismissal. Another reminder that I had no place in her life, that my sacrifice had been nothing more than an inconvenience. I finally received a text, but it wasn't the message I had hoped for. Thanks. I've got it all handled now. That was it. No gratitude, no recognition of what I had done for her. She had moved on, as I knew she would, and I was left behind, standing in the ruins of a relationship I had tried so hard to salvage. The question lingered, sharp and cutting. Was this all our relationship had been? Was it only about money? about what I could give her to make her life easier. What had happened to the love we once shared? The laughter and the late night talks, the bond that should have been unbreakable. As I stared at the text on my screen, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The money was gone, but the emptiness remained. I had paid the price, but I wasn't sure what I had gotten in return. Love had a price. But did that mean it was always tied to what you could give? Or was there something deeper? Something that could never be bought or paid for? It had been a few days since I'd transferred the money, and the exhaustion weighed on me more than the debt ever had. I thought that paying off Lily's wedding bill would bring a sense of resolution, a quiet peace in my heart. But as I sat in my living room, staring at the empty space, I felt nothing but emptiness. The transaction had been completed, the debt paid, but there was no sense of relief. I had given everything I could, and still, there was this hollow ache inside me that refused to go away. The phone remained silent. Lily hadn't called, hadn't even acknowledged the sacrifice I'd made. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder that I was no longer a part of her life. I had always believed that love was supposed to be unconditional, that a mother's love was a constant, unwavering force. But in this moment, I began to question everything I had believed about love, about sacrifice. Could a mother continue to give without ever receiving anything in return? Was it possible to love someone so deeply, so selflessly, when that love was never reciprocated? I had spent my life teaching my children that love meant sacrifice. But now, I wondered if I had taught them the wrong lesson. Had I given so much of myself that I had forgotten how to protect what was left of me? I needed to change. I needed to stop living in the shadow of my sacrifices, constantly giving and never asking for anything in return. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness just to make others happy. But where did I start? How did I undo a lifetime of selflessness, of being the one who always gave? How did I learn to be someone who could love herself, who could finally give herself the same compassion and understanding that she so freely gave to others? It was in the midst of these thoughts that I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. Diane, an old friend from my college days, was standing in line at the coffee shop, her face lighting up with recognition as she saw me. It felt like a lifetime had passed since I'd last seen her, and in some ways it had. We exchanged pleasantries, and I invited her to sit with me. As we talked, the conversation turned naturally to the topic of family. I told her about Lily, about the wedding, about the sacrifices I had made, and how it felt like I had lost everything in the process. Diane listened carefully, her eyes filled with empathy. "You know, Sarah," she said gently, "you've always been the one who gave, the one who put everyone else's needs before your own. But when was the last time you thought about what you need? What makes you happy?" Her words hung in the air, heavy and true. I hadn't thought about what I needed. I had spent so many years focused on everyone else, thinking that was the right thing to do, that I had forgotten about myself. Diane's question cut through the fog that had clouded my mind for so long. "You're right," I said softly, my voice cracking with the realization. "I've been living for everyone else, and I've lost sight of who I am in the process." Diane smiled gently, her hand reaching across the table to touch mine. "Loving yourself is the hardest thing to do, especially when you've been taught that love means giving everything away. But sometimes, the best thing you can do for others is to love yourself first." I sat there, looking at my old friend, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lifting. It wasn't instant. It wasn't a magical transformation. But something inside me began to shift, slowly but surely. For the first time, I began to realize that loving myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. If I couldn't take care of myself, how could I truly care for anyone else? It was the beginning of something new, something I had never fully embraced before. And as I walked out of that coffee shop, I felt a small, tentative seed of hope taking root. Maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back to myself. It was as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. For so long, I had been trapped in a cycle of self-sacrifice, putting everyone else's needs before my own. But after my conversation with Diane, something shifted. I had always defined myself by my role as a mother, as a caregiver. But I realized now that I had forgotten what it was like to be Sarah. To do things that made me happy, to feel joy outside of the constraints of obligation. The first step was small. I signed up for a painting class. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I had always loved art, had always found peace in the quiet strokes of a brush, but I had put it aside for years. The demands of motherhood, the expectations, had crowded out that part of me. But now, I was making space for it again. I walked into that first class with a nervous excitement, like a child about to embark on something new. The walls of the studio were covered in vibrant canvases, each one telling a story. The smell of fresh paint filled the air, and I immediately felt a sense of calm. The instructor, a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes, welcomed us warmly. I looked around at the others in the class, young and old, experienced and novices. None of them seemed to be carrying the weight that I had been for so long. I felt like an outsider, but at the same time, I felt a flicker of belonging. The first few brushstrokes felt awkward, uncertain, but with each movement, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. I didn't have to be anyone's mother here. I didn't have to fix anyone's problems. I was simply me, holding a paintbrush and creating something just for the sake of creating. A few days later, I joined a book club. I'd never been part of a group like that before. The women there were from all walks of life, each with their own stories and perspectives. I had spent so much time in isolation, focusing on my own loss, that I had forgotten how to connect with others outside of my role as a parent. But in this group, I wasn't just Sarah, the mother. I was Sarah, the woman who loved stories, who wanted to learn, who had something to offer beyond the confines of my past. And then, the unexpected happened. My phone buzzed as I was on my way home from the group meeting. It was a call from Lily. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. It had been weeks since we'd spoken, and I had prepared myself for this moment. Had told myself that I didn't need to bend over backward anymore to keep our relationship intact. I answered the call, and her voice was soft, almost tentative. "Mom," she said. I wanted to check in. I hope you're okay." I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. My first instinct was to apologize, to say I was sorry for everything, to give her what she wanted. But as I listened to her voice, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt the need to prove anything. I had done the work on myself, and I was learning to value my own needs as much as I valued hers. "I'm doing better, Lily," I said, my voice steady. "I've been taking some time for myself, and I think it's helping." There was a pause on the other end of the line, but this time, it didn't feel like a rejection. It felt like a step toward something new. "I'm glad to hear that," she replied, her tone softer now. "I know things have been hard, but I hope we can find a way to move forward." For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. The conversation wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. The message was clear: when you start to love yourself, everything around you begins to shift. Relationships, too, can evolve, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new, something better. Perhaps, for the first time in a long time, I could learn to love not only my daughter but also myself. And that, in itself, was the most important step of all. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, breaking the stillness of my afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I hesitated. I had spent so many days learning how to exist on my own, carving out pieces of joy for myself, that the thought of returning to a relationship that had caused me so much pain felt like stepping back into a storm I had barely survived. But when I opened the door, there she stood, Lily, my daughter, the person I had been trying so desperately to reach for so long. Her eyes were red, her expression a mixture of regret and uncertainty. She held her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if unsure how to proceed, how to face the woman she had hurt. "Mom," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. I didn't know what to feel. There was relief, yes, but also an undercurrent of something else. Something that still stung. The years of sacrifice, the silence, the hurt, it all felt like it was pouring out of me now. And yet I couldn't find it within myself to say the words that I had rehearsed for so long. "It's okay," didn't feel truthful, not yet. But her apology, it was a start. She stepped into the house, and for a moment, I wondered if this was truly the moment of healing or just another false dawn. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared so many conversations, so many quiet mornings. This time it felt different, less comfortable, more fragile. "I don't know where to start," Lily said, wiping her eyes. I've been thinking about everything, about how I treated you. I was so caught up in my own life, my own expectations, that I didn't realize how much I was pushing you away. You've always been there for me, and I took that for granted. I wanted to say something in response, to tell her that everything would be okay, but the truth was, I wasn't sure yet. There was too much between us, too many years of hurt, of silence. But as I looked at her, I saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the rawness in her voice, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I've been thinking about it too, I said quietly. About everything that happened, and why it all went so wrong. I paused, gathering the strength to say the words I knew I needed to say. But I've also realized something. I can't love you properly, not until I love myself first. Lily's eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. You don't understand yet, but I've spent so many years giving, sacrificing, thinking that love was about constantly doing things for others. But I've forgotten how to love myself. And if I keep giving without considering my own needs, then I'll lose myself in the process. I'm learning, Lily, that true love, real love, is about respecting yourself enough to stand up for what you need. There was a long silence between us, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that allows for growth, for understanding, for healing. Lily's gaze softened, and I saw a glimmer of something in her eyes, something that resembled understanding. I think I get it now, she said softly. I've been so focused on what I wanted from you, but I never stopped to think about what you needed. I'm sorry for that, Mom. I'm sorry for not seeing you. I nodded, my heart aching but also swelling with a quiet sense of relief. This wasn't the perfect resolution, the neat ending I had imagined. It was messier, more complicated. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were finally starting to see each other. Not as roles to be fulfilled, but as two people who had hurt each other, who had loved each other, and who now, finally, understood that love wasn't about what we gave to one another. It was about what we both needed, respect, space, and the willingness to change. Agike kuatho, I said softly. Hum tien ald hidun ha adun bu bite tendrinon ha. Her smile was small, but it was enough. And for the first time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, we were on our way to something better. The decision to move on had been a slow, gradual one. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was the result of months. No. Years of trying, failing, and finally realizing that sometimes letting go was the only way forward. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without pain. But as I sat in the quiet of my home, reflecting on everything that had happened with Lily, I knew deep down that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what was lost. The truth was, I had spent so many years measuring my worth by my relationship with her, by my role as her mother, her protector, her provider. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had given so much of myself to the idea of being the perfect mother, the perfect woman in her eyes, that I had neglected to be just Sarah. I had neglected to be the person I wanted to be, the person I was before I became defined by the role I played in her life. I realized, then, that I had to start living for myself. I couldn't keep measuring my life by someone else's standards, by the love that was conditional on my sacrifices. The time had come for me to reclaim my own happiness, my own sense of self-worth. So, I started small. I spent my days taking walks in the park, reading books that had nothing to do with motherhood, and signing up for a yoga class. It was a simple life, a quiet one, but it felt like the first step towards something bigger. I wasn't looking for a grand revelation or some dramatic transformation. I just wanted to feel whole again, to feel like I could breathe without the weight of guilt and regret suffocating me. But as with everything, life had a way of throwing curveballs. A few weeks later, I received a message from Lily. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I debated whether to open it. But curiosity got the better of me. Mom, I've been thinking. I would really like you to come to my wedding. I understand if you don't want to, but it would mean a lot to me if you were there. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. The words were simple enough, but they carried so much weight. It was the first real communication I had received from her in weeks, and it was an invitation that carried with it both the promise of reconciliation and the threat of old wounds being reopened. I had always imagined that I would be there for her on her wedding day, But this was different. The old me would have jumped at the chance, would have felt compelled to go, no matter the cost to my own emotional well-being. But the new me, the woman I was becoming, no longer felt that pressure. I had learned to stop measuring my worth by how much I gave, by how much I sacrificed. I realized I didn't need to attend her wedding to prove my love. The truth was, I had already given everything I could, and it had not been reciprocated. I sat with that realization for a while. And then I made the decision. I would not go. It wasn't out of spite, but out of self-respect. I had come to terms with the fact that our relationship would never be the same again. The wounds were too deep, and there was too much hurt to undo. But I could still live my life, still find joy, even if she wasn't a part of it in the way I had once hoped. In a way, it was liberating. I wasn't giving up on her. I was giving up on the idea that I had to sacrifice my own happiness for her to be happy. I could love her from a distance, and that was enough. Sometimes giving up is the only way to move forward. It wasn't a failure. It was a step in the right direction. A step toward a life where I could finally live for myself. And that, I realized, was the most important journey of all. For the first time in years, I woke up in the morning feeling like I could breathe. There was no rush. No frantic thoughts of what I needed to do for others, no pressure to be everything to everyone. It was just me. And, for the first time in so long, I allowed myself to enjoy it. I had always put others first, especially Lily. But now, in this new chapter of my life, I was learning what it meant to put myself first. I started doing things I had put off for years. I took long walks in the morning, letting the fresh air fill my lungs and clear my mind. I read books for pleasure. Not because they were required, or because I thought they would help me be a better person. I took up painting again, rediscovering a hobby that had been buried for decades. I felt like a part of me was waking up, parts of me that had been silenced for so long by the constant noise of obligation. I also began traveling. At first, it was small trips, weekend getaways to places I'd never been, exploring cities I had only dreamed of seeing. But as I traveled, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just visiting new places, I was discovering new parts of myself. I saw beauty in the simplicity of a quiet street in Paris, in the way the sun set over the ocean in Greece. I felt the freedom that came from being able to just be, without the weight of other people's expectations pulling me down. Each trip felt like a fresh start. I didn't have to answer to anyone, didn't have to play the role of the dutiful mother, the one who always knew what to do. In these new places, I was just Sarah, and for the first time, I liked who I was becoming. It was during one of these trips, when I was visiting a small town in Italy, that I received a message from Lily. "Mom, can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. It had been weeks since we last spoke. And in that time, I had found a kind of peace I hadn't known I was capable of. I wasn't sure what this message meant, but I couldn't ignore it. I found a quiet cafe and called her back. "Mom?" Lily's voice came through the phone, tentative and uncertain. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About how I've treated you. About what you've been doing. I can hear it in your voice. You've changed. You're not the same person I left behind. And I think I might have lost sight of that." I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to her words. There was no anger in her voice anymore, no bitterness. Just a quiet, reflective tone. And in that moment, I realized that something had shifted, not just in me, but in her too. "I've been doing a lot of things for me," I said softly. "I'm learning how to live for myself, not just for everyone else." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I can tell," she finally said, her voice quieter now. "I'm glad. I think I finally get it, Mom. I think I see what you've been trying to tell me all along." We talked for a while longer, but something in me had already shifted. I wasn't looking for her approval anymore. I wasn't trying to earn back her love. I had found something far more valuable, my own peace. And for the first time in years, I wasn't living for anyone else but myself. The change hadn't come from her. It had come from me, from the woman I had once been and the woman I was learning to be again. Change doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it comes from within. And that was the most powerful lesson of all. The phone call came unexpectedly, like a ripple in the calm waters of my new life. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to hear Lily's voice on the other end, so distant and yet so familiar. But now, there she was again, calling me, reaching out. For a moment, I hesitated, not sure if I was ready to reopen old wounds. But in the end, I knew that if there was ever going to be a chance for healing, I needed to hear her side, just as she needed to hear mine. Mom. Her voice was tentative, uncertain, but it was a start. Can we talk? Really talk? I sat down, my hands trembling slightly. Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind? We started slowly with small talk, like two strangers who had shared a life but no longer knew each other. But eventually, the conversation turned to the heart of the matter. The space that had grown between us, the silence that had replaced our once easy rapport. I've been thinking a lot, Lily said, her voice soft but steady. About everything, about the things I said, the way I acted. I've been so angry, Mom. But I didn't know why. I thought I had everything figured out, that I was doing what was best for me, but I wasn't. I was hurting you, and I didn't even see it. The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so many months blaming her, resenting her for the way things had turned out. But now, hearing her speak so honestly, I felt the tension in my chest begin to loosen. It wasn't just me who had been hurt. It wasn't just me who had lost. I know I've made mistakes, she continued, her voice cracking slightly. I pushed you away, Mom. And I didn't even realize how much I needed you until you weren't there anymore. I'm sorry for everything. For the things I said. For the things I didn't say. For not realizing that I was asking too much from you. I wanted to say something, to tell her that it was okay, that I understood. But the truth was, it wasn't okay. It wasn't easy to let go of the hurt, of the years of sacrificing for her, without ever feeling like I got anything in return. But in that moment, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of the past. It was about allowing ourselves the space to grow. I understand, Lily, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But you need to know that I had to let go too. I had to stop trying to fix everything, to stop putting everyone else's needs before my own. I didn't know who I was anymore. And I needed to find that again. I needed to love myself before I could love you fully. There was a long silence on the other end, and for a moment, I thought the conversation had come to an end. But then Lily spoke again, her voice softer now, more reflective. I think I get it, Mom, she said, her words hesitant but sincere. I've spent so long thinking that I was grown up, that I had it all figured out, but I haven't. I still have a lot to learn. I still need to figure out who I am, just like you did. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. She wasn't ready yet, I thought. But that was okay. Maybe I wasn't ready either. Maybe healing, like everything else, would take time. I'm sorry, she repeated, the words carrying the weight of everything unsaid. For everything. For not being there for you the way you've always been there for me. I know, I whispered. And I'm sorry too. For not being strong enough to see that you needed space, that you needed to learn on your own. There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. Do you think we can start over? Do you think we can move forward? I didn't have an answer right away. But in that silence, I realized something. Maybe, just maybe, we could. Healing took time. It was messy. It was complicated, and it wouldn't be perfect. But maybe, this was the beginning of something new. The relationship wasn't fixed in that moment, but it had begun to shift. And in that small step forward, I understood that love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about understanding, about forgiving each other and ourselves. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we were both willing to take the first step. The quiet of the morning wrapped around me like a soft blanket. It was the kind of peace I hadn't known I was missing until I found it. The world outside continued on as it always had, full of noise, of people rushing through their lives without a moment to stop and think. But for once, I wasn't caught in that rush. I wasn't desperately clinging to the past or trying to fix things that were broken beyond repair. The pain of the past few years had softened, not because it had disappeared, but because I had learned to live with it. The anger that had once boiled inside me was no longer a constant companion. It wasn't that I had forgiven everything. It wasn't that simple. But I had accepted that some things, some people, could not be changed. And in accepting that, I had found a strange kind of peace. I sat by the window, the warm sunlight spilling across the floor, and I thought about everything that had happened. About Lily, about the choices we had both made, and the ways in which we had hurt each other. There had been so much pain, so much resentment, but as I reflected on it now, it didn't feel as sharp as it once had. It felt like a distant memory, something I could look back on without being consumed by it. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The truth was, I hadn't needed to fix everything. I hadn't needed to be everything for everyone. And I certainly hadn't needed to keep sacrificing myself to make others happy. I had spent years trying to mold myself into someone who could never be fully appreciated, trying to please people who were never going to be satisfied. But now, I realized that I could stand on my own, without anyone's approval, without anyone's validation. As I let the light fill the room, I thought about the journey I had been on. The journey from being a mother who gave everything to being a woman who could finally put herself first. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been painless, but it had been necessary. The road to finding myself again was long and winding, but I had walked it, step by painful step. And now I was here. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even sad. I had let go of all those emotions that had weighed me down for so long. The truth was, I didn't need Lily's forgiveness to feel whole again. I didn't need her love to validate my worth. I had rediscovered something far more important, my own sense of self-worth, and in that moment I realized something profound. Love and self-respect cannot be traded for anything. Not for any material possession or any external validation. They are not for sale, not for anyone's approval or for anyone's expectations. I had given pieces of myself away for so long, believing that if I just gave more, I would be enough. But now I knew better. I was enough just as I was. The journey was far from over, but I had learned what I needed to. I had learned to love myself, to stand up for myself, and to find peace in who I was. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. A year had passed since I made the decision to stop living in the shadows of my past, to stop trying to fix things that were beyond my control. I had spent so many years caught in a cycle of giving, of sacrificing, believing that if I just loved enough, if I just gave enough, everything would eventually fall into place. But I had learned the hard way that love doesn't work like that. It was not about constant sacrifice or trying to be everything for everyone. It was about being whole, being true to myself, and accepting that sometimes things are out of my hands. My life had changed. The days of waking up with a sense of dread, a heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words, were gone. Now, I woke up with a sense of purpose, of quiet satisfaction. I had created a life for myself, a life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or validation. I had friends who supported me, interests that brought me joy, and a deep, unshakable sense of self-worth. I had learned to embrace independence, to celebrate it. It wasn't about being alone. It was about learning to be at peace with myself. And while I had come to terms with the fact that my relationship with Lily might never be the same, I had found a new kind of peace. I had finally realized that I didn't need her to define my happiness. But then, something unexpected happened. One evening, after dinner, I received a call from Lily. Her name appeared on my screen, and for a moment, I froze. It had been so long since we'd spoken. So many unspoken words between us. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this conversation, but I knew it was time. Mom. Her voice was tentative, but there was something different in it. Something softer. I've been thinking about everything. About how things went down between us. I see now what you were trying to do. I understand why you needed to step back, why you needed to focus on yourself, and I respect that. The words were like a balm to my soul. I hadn't expected them. I hadn't even realized how much I needed to hear them. For so long, I had lived with the feeling that Lily would never understand, that the distance between us was permanent. But now I heard something new in her voice, maturity, empathy, a recognition of my pain and my needs. I know I hurt you, Lily continued. And I'm sorry for that. I've been thinking about how selfish I was, how much I demanded from you without ever considering what you needed. I was wrong. I held my breath. Her apology was everything I had hoped for but never expected. I wanted to say that everything was forgiven, that we could move on without any more hurt. But the truth was, forgiveness wasn't just about the words, it was about both of us learning and growing. Lily, I said softly, my voice steady. I appreciate that. And I want you to know that I'm proud of you. For recognizing what you did. For taking the time to understand. We paused, the weight of the conversation hanging between us. But this time it wasn't suffocating, it was freeing. Over time, we started to rebuild. Slowly, cautiously, we found our way back to each other. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension, still traces of the past that lingered, but we were both committed to trying. To learning how to communicate, how to respect each other's boundaries, how to love each other without expectations. Our relationship didn't happen overnight, but it became something different, something better. We learned to respect each other, to honor each other's choices. And in that respect, we found healing. Mother-daughter relationships aren't always easy, I realized. But they can be healed, mended, and strengthened if both people are willing to change. And that was the beginning of our new chapter. I stood by the window, the morning sunlight streaming through the glass, and I realized, for the first time in a long while, that I was free. The weight I had carried for so many years, the burden of trying to fix everything, of being everything to everyone, had finally lifted. The past had shaped me. Yes, but it no longer defined me. I was no longer trapped in the role of the self-sacrificing mother, the one who gave and never asked for anything in return. I was no longer living for someone else's approval. I was finally living for myself. The journey had been long. It had been painful at times, filled with moments where I wondered if I would ever find my way out of the maze of guilt and regret. But I had made it. I had rediscovered who I was. Sarah, not just a mother, not just a daughter, but a woman in her own right, worthy of love, of respect, and of happiness. The freedom I felt was overwhelming, like a deep breath after years of holding my breath underwater. For so long, I had believed that love meant giving everything. That to love someone was to lose yourself completely in the process. But the truth was, I had been giving without considering my own needs. I had been loving without loving myself first. It wasn't until I learned to value myself that I realized what true love could be. The love I had for Lily was still there. Still deep, still fierce, but it was no longer tainted by the desperation to please her, to make up for something I hadn't even done. I had stopped sacrificing my own identity for her approval. Instead, I loved her from a place of strength, not weakness. I loved her because I wanted to, not because I had to. And for the first time, I saw her as an adult, capable of making her own decisions, capable of learning and growing on her own. Our relationship had changed, and I could see now that it had changed for the better. It was built on something real, something solid: respect, understanding, and love. We no longer expected each other to be perfect. We accepted each other's flaws, knowing that love didn't require perfection, just honesty and effort. It wasn't the kind of love that demanded sacrifice, but the kind of love that lifted each other up. The phone rang one evening, and it was Lily. Her voice on the other end was no longer hesitant or filled with regret. It was calm, confident, and full of warmth. "I've been thinking about everything," she said. "And I just want you to know that I see you now, Mom. I see everything you've done for me, and I see how much you've changed. I'm proud of you." Tears welled up in my eyes, but this time they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Thank you, Lily," I whispered. "I'm proud of you too." It was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel the need to apologize for my choices. I had stopped apologizing for taking care of myself, for setting boundaries, and in that I had found a new kind of love, a love that was rooted in mutual respect, not in obligation. Love, I realized, had always been there. It was just that I had been too afraid to claim it for myself. True love, I thought, is when we learn to love ourselves first. Only then can we truly love others in a way that's healthy, fulfilling, and free from the chains of expectation. And in that freedom, I had found my happiness. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey through Sarah's life. Sarah Thompson, 53, a woman who spent years lost in the shadows of her own sacrifices, fighting to give everything for others while losing herself in the process. Her story is one of pain, regret, and the long road to rediscovering who she really is. For so long, Sarah had been consumed by the overwhelming need to be everything to everyone, especially to her daughter, Lily. But it wasn't until she hit rock bottom that she realized true freedom lies not in what we give, but in the love we show ourselves. The struggle, the sacrifice, the heartbreak, it all led her to this pivotal moment where she finally understood the power of self, love, and acceptance. If Sarah's story has resonated with you, if you've ever felt the weight of unspoken expectations or the suffocating need to please others, remember this: healing starts from within. You deserve happiness, and you deserve to love yourself first. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Share your own story in the comments below. How do you find the strength to put yourself first? How have you learned to reclaim your peace and joy? Let's talk, and let's continue to support each other in this journey of healing and self-discovery. Thank you for being part of Sarah's story. Let's keep the conversation going.